Ladies and gentlemen, kicking off the first stop on his world tour, our new president and prophet, Russell M. Nelson! You say you want some revelation, well, here you go. It's gonna blow your freaking mind.
Greetings, brothers and sisters. Welcome to the weekly Mormon News Roundup, where Richie, Steadman, and Dives are going to ruminate on the great and spacious beehive. We have Richie from the Cultural Hall podcast. He's going to be co-hosting. Some articles that we'll discuss are Charlie Bird, the Cosmo the Cougar. He gets engaged to another man, and that's quite controversial. Church announces background checks in the United Kingdom. An LDS couple is savagely mocked on Twitter for their supposed anti-gay rights stance, and Elder Soares has gone live on Chilean television. You're not going to want to miss a minute of this episode. If you want to get in touch with me, I'm at MormonNewsRoundup.org, or you can send me an email to kolob@MormonNewsRoundup.org. That's KOLOB. I just want to make this everyone aware that, hey, we've also got, I started a TikTok account here. Actually, this is an Instagram account. I uploaded a number of shorts. I cut up some episodes, got some fun, interesting content there. And hey, I also started a TikTok account. I finally got around to uploading a bunch of shorts into there. So we've got some really fun content out there for everybody. And this is going to be a tremendous episode. I'd like to invite onto the program Richie Steadman. Welcome to the Mormon News Roundup.
Well, thank you very much. A pleasure to be here.
Well, it's a great honor to be here. Richie, for those who don't know you, who are you? Who are you? Can you briefly explain yourself?
Well, I am, as Facebook would tell you, I am a father, a dreamer, a lover of ice cream. I do podcast consulting, and I've hosted a radio show for BYU Radio for a couple of years. I produced an alternative rock station for 15 years, their morning show. Born and raised in Salt Lake City, Utah. Spent some time in Cleveland on a religiously affiliated vacation, and then I went to Clown College in Chicago, Illinois, and then back here, living in Taylorsville, Utah, where I do. And I want to correct you. I hate to be that guy that corrects from straight out of the gate. You called the Cultural Hall a podcast, and it is a show available in podcast form. So I don't want to be, even though it says, I know. It says
it does literally say on it literally says, Richie, on your podcast, it says your title of your podcast is the Cultural Hall Podcast. Is that correct? Do I have that wrong? Or?
Sure. No, it's correct. But if you've listened for any amount of time, you'll know it's sort of an inside joke that we call it a show available in podcast form. But yeah, I mean, it's a podcast. It is something that you can, stream or get on your devices and find it wherever you find the Mormon News Roundup.
Sure. Yeah. You have a very popular Facebook page here, 10,000 followers. You're posting all of the time here. What type of content do you post on your Facebook page?
Well, our Facebook page is the same like with our Twitter and everything else. It's anything that has to do with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It can be directly correlated, or it can be really super tangential. We can have something where someone we assume to be a member of the church did something in a different state, started a restaurant or committed a crime or whatever the thing may be. We'll post that on our social media. That's sort of our qualifier. And even if it's not really, really close or even really, really far away, if we just want to share that particular thing, we'll figure out some sort of way that we can relate it back to the church so we can post it.
Yeah, you also have a YouTube account here, and it's kind of a shame, Richie, that you only have 44 subscribers, because all of your episodes here, they're on YouTube, and it's a shame that more people don't watch that portion. I assume that a lot of people listen to your podcast through Apple Podcasting and things like that, and not necessarily YouTube. Is that right?
Well, a big thing. You just scooped the Cultural Hall right now. We actually have never talked about that we have a YouTube channel. So the fact that we have 44, I'm pretty surprised. That's great for not having ever talked about it. Those are people that have just found it. We don't really mention it. I just have sort of put it there in the future hopes that we would make a bigger deal out of it. But for right now, the bandwidth I have is really to just care about the audio component. But yeah, you can find us, the Cultural Hall, on YouTube as well.
Now, you're not the only one who covers LDS news. Obviously, you have the church's official account, you have the Deseret News, you have KSL. You also have who I would assume is your direct competitor, This Week in Mormons. I assume that you're familiar with them.
Sure.
And I want to ask you a very pointed question right off the bat here. What makes the Cultural Hall the Cultural Hall show, which is released in podcast form?
Thank you.
What makes that better than This Week in Mormons, or quite frankly, the Mormon News Roundup? Is Cultural Hall the best LDS news source? And if so, why?
Oh, look at you putting me on the spot like that.
Sure.
Is it the best? And if so, why? I would never be able to say if it's the best. But I do say a few things about it. One, I would say that it is the longest running with the same host, the most amount of episodes by the same host, and that is me. This Week in Mormons, we were sort of neck and neck, and then when Jeff, who originally started This Week in Mormons with Al, when he decided to sell or give it up to Kurt Frankham from over at Leading Saints, that made that no longer, the case that he was the longest running. So I think that there's that. What makes it the best? It may not be the best for you. What I think makes us the best is it's not just about the news that we talk about. It certainly is about the news that we talk about, but it's also about the community that we create. I started this show off with you saying, hey, it's a show that's available in podcast form. It's like almost like a TV series where you've been able to follow the different hosts as characters. It's not just what they're talking about, but also who they are as individuals. We had one host for a long time, very loved by people, and he ended up getting ALS, and people were glued to hear his story and heartbroken to be able to know how he has been, and other people too. Another guest, a guest host, he recently had gastric bypass surgery, and so people kind of follow that. So if there's something that I think that makes it the best, it's that it's not just news and not just interviews. It's a community where anyone who loves the church and likes knowing sort of the weird, nuancy, different things about it, whether it's the hardcore church history or the random, cultural fact about it, they can find a home within the Cultural Hall.
That sounds tremendous. I definitely have a lot to learn about LDS news, and I'm very humbled to have someone who has your bona fides on the program. Richie, is there anything else about your personal life or religious beliefs that you'd like to share with us before we get ready to do, as you would call it, articles of news? Is there anything else about your personal life that you'd like to discuss?
I think that people find it pretty interesting, and I've been pretty open about this over at the Cultural Hall. So if people want to listen, I think it's episode 52 or 54. So a long time ago, I talked all about it and make short references to it in various episodes about the fact that for most of my 20s, so the early aughts, I was excommunicated from the church and then found my way back to the church, being rebaptized and then having blessings restored. And there's a lot, because we don't talk about that a ton within the church, there's a lot to be discussed with that. I don't think that it defines who I am, but I know that a lot of people have been like, oh, wait, what? What is this? Tell me more. So maybe that would be the interesting thing that I would add to it.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That really means a lot. That's very vulnerable, and I really appreciate it. I've listened to a lot of episodes of the Cultural Hall, dozens of episodes, and I don't recall you talking about that point a lot. And I think that that's very special. So I appreciate your openness and honesty with bringing that up. It's a little awkward to transition from that to the Mormon Joke of the Week, but
no.
You do have our Mormon Joke of the Week, and here at the Mormon News Roundup, we always have a joke of the week. Do you mind sharing yours with us?
Okay, well, so I didn't know if it was like a knock and how we do it. So you're familiar, Dives, about how Joseph Smith, it's well known that in the early times that he would do the stick pull with everyone, right? That was the game that they would play, and yeah. He was jovial and everybody liked to do that. Well, that there is a game that they played in the Book of Mormon too. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't know that one. Boy, I gotta refresh my memory there. No, I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, they were knee fights.
Okay. Well, they also had anti-knee fights too. So,
well, sure, those are people that just didn't want to play.
Okay, that makes it. Those were people who were picked last on the schoolyard, I guess.
Yep,
right?
Yep.
Okay, so hey, hopping in the news here this week, we have a couple of follow-ups here that we want to bring up. We did discuss this last week. It's a Utah School District, Davis School District, removed the Bible from some school libraries, and now it's received a request to review the Book of Mormon. We did cover this last week, but it is hitting mainstream news here. This isn't just being picked up here by KSL, Richie. CNN is picking up on this article. It's really gone viral.
Well, and the context of it, as I understand it, is that they've said, "Hey, listen, guys, there was these restrictions, these basic things that they said we do not want our kids to be able to have access to any sort of literature that says blank and blank and blank and blank and blank, right?" And sort of let out these guidelines. And there were some people that were pretty heated about that, and then took the opportunity to think about it and say, "Well, wait a minute. The Bible has blank and blank and blank and blank and blank." And so that's how the original thing started. And now, because it's Utah, maybe because they know that it will, infuriate or certainly heighten the situation. They've said, "Hey, look at the Book of Mormon. It's full of violence. It's full of wars and beheadings and, all of these things." And, I think it's right that the bigger media is starting to pick this up, because the conversation, it needs to be had that when we try and ban something, and I don't know where the right thing is. I don't have kids in middle school or elementary school or high school. I'm not sure about that, but I think that when we try to ban something, it only reinforces the other side, and I think that it makes it where people just dig in their heels a little bit more. An example that I used in a recent episode, as we were talking about this, is the church, we know, very against gay marriage, and the state of Utah actually played a large role in it becoming federally accepted for same-sex marriage. Because we pushed so hard against it, it ended up not going or not taking as long to go through all of the process. And then it was like, no, it's legal, and here we are. Whereas if we would not have pushed so much against it, that it might have taken a longer time in the courts. And I just think this is another thing that people are saying, "Hey, if we take these other books out, then we have to take the Bible out and the Book of Mormon." And already, to split the hair here in the state of Utah, they've said, "Well, we're going to get a religious exemption. Religious texts don't count." And I just don't think that's fair. If you're banning things for content, you ban all the things for content.
Yeah, that's those great sentiments there. The church. One reason I wanted to bring this up is that the church has responded a little bit to the this censorship in Davis County, and I think one of the reasons that it went national is because Utah is perceived as such a religious state, and why would such a conservative state, where Utah leads the nation, the percentage of people who go to church on Sunday, it's something like 49%. Why would such a perceived religious state ban the Bible and, heaven forbid, the Book of Mormon? That's why it's received so much traction. And I did want to bring this up that Tad R. Callister, the former Sunday School General President for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the church did have somewhat of an official response to this, and he said that he strongly endorsed including Christian texts in public schools. He said the whole purpose of the Book of Mormon and the Bible is to help us become like Jesus Christ. I hope it will be an integral part of our schools, which is not only to give information to our hearts, and the greatest which is not only to give information to our hearts, and the greatest character of all is Jesus Christ, Tad Callister said. Now, the one reason I brought that up is that this tweet here, I don't know, the reaction from the tweet is very interesting. They said, "Well, this is LDS leaders not understanding the separation of church and state." What's your reaction to all of this, Richie?
Well, the thing to me is, I don't think you can make exceptions, and that's the hard thing, because I get it from a religious perspective. A card-carrying member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I want people to have Christ in their life. I want them to, have his example to be able to emulate and be able to follow and learn more about him. And then yes, I think so. But if there are people, say within the school system, that don't believe in Jesus Christ and just look at, this text as written things of vulgarity or of violence or of whatever the objections are with the guidelines, those people don't have that same attachment. And if you just look at the base level of, does it meet the guidelines to be banned, it does. And so I mean, I don't know. I think that the state of Utah will likely make a religious exemption, but I think an argument can be made on the other hand. So take one of the guidelines is some level of sexual content, right? So if I'm a parent and I say, hey, I want my kids to be able to have access to this particular book that has some level of sexual content, because I think that will make them a more sexually responsible person in the world. Well, I think we all want people to be more sexually responsible, but then why do you get to tell me that, hey, I don't get to have this for my kid in the same way that you want it to have you for your kid, that they can learn of Christ, right? It's a tricky thing when you start saying that's okay, that's not okay, and having religious exemptions. And I think, truthfully, I think it's where feelings get hurt, and I think the church does itself a disservice.
Fantastic take, Richie. And you brought us this next article as well here. Elder Holland here, he's beginning a slow return to service in the 12th. What's going on there, Richie?
Well, as we dial the clock and calendar back a little bit, and if you remember at this last general conference, when watching Elder Holland, there was definitely that moment where you go, ooh, okay. He's, I'm not sure exactly how old he is. I'm assuming mid-80s, though I don't have that exactly in front of me. Having some health concerns, post-COVID kind of things. And he said, hey, I'm taking a step back, going to focus on my health, going to try and get everything right. And they relieved him of his duties for, I think, 2 months in totality. Yeah. And now sort of stepping back into it lightly into it, both speaking, traveling, and being able to do his duties as regularly saw. To me, I think it's maybe miraculous. Is that the word? We don't use the word miracles very often, but miraculous. I admit and fully repent of the fact that I thought, oh no, this is when we're losing Elder Holland, when they said that he was going to step away, but he seems to be coming back and fighting and doing awesome, and now he'll go back to his duties.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wish him the very best. I think that there is a lot of haters. I don't know how to call it any other way. A lot of haters out there who were really nasty about the conspiracy theories with regards to the COVID and the SUU commencement address, and him withdrawing from graduation, that somehow this was somehow linked and that he was faking the COVID to get out of the SUU commencement. I think that those type of takes are really, really in bad faith. And whoever's making those, I find that very repugnant. So, is there any last thoughts on Elder Holland coming back, Richie?
Well, I'm a graduate of Southern Utah University.
Is that right?
And so to know that he was going to speak at their commencement, I mean, again, I don't know if it's a Utah thing and we just sort of mix these things. I'd love to hear from Elder Holland, but is it an appropriate thing for him to be speaking at a non-religious commencement? I don't know. Most of the time, there are those people that speak are business leaders or thought leaders, and I guess maybe that's where he qualifies. He's from St. George, so that Southern Utah part makes him relevant as far as that goes. But I mean, like Elder Holland at BYU or BYU Idaho or BYU Hawaii makes sense. I think when we start to kind of bring that out a little bit just to Utah, certainly there's a lot of people that appreciate it, but is it appropriate in a public education setting? And I mean, I don't know. It's not to say he's not a good speaker. It's not to say that he wouldn't have great things to say that everyone could benefit from. But is it, and does it make sense to have high-ranking religious leaders of one particular faith speak, or any particular faith speak at a commencement?
Those are absolutely excellent questions, and I don't have the answer to that for you.
Oh, I was hoping you had the answer. Come on.
I do not have the answer, although I do have a great deal of experience and background in higher education. You're asking questions that are beyond my pay grade.
Okay.
But for our listeners out there, we release these episodes every on Sunday night at 9:30 in the live chat. Let us know your thoughts. Should Elder Holland, should he be able to speak at SUU? Or any other religious leader for that matter. Presumably, most of these speakers, usually a commencement speaker, is paid. Should we be using at a public university public tax dollars to fund private religious speakers? That's a question. Put it in the live chat. Let us know your thoughts. We'd be very grateful for this.
Well, now, adding one question to that: was Elder Holland to be paid?
Yeah, we don't know.
Don't know, but
we don't know.
But it would be curious to know if whenever religious leaders speak at these commencements, I'm sure that, well, I guess I'm not sure. I would assume as much that when they speak at the religious schools that they do not get paid, but I wonder if there is compensation if they step out to any of the public education.
It's a good question. Typically, a commencement speaker is paid. That's why I just said typically. I don't have any insider information. I don't like to be conspiratorial, but typically that they are. You found this other article here, Richie, which I thought was really interesting here. Navajo translators and experts work to complete the standard works. This is from the Daily Universe. Richie, the standard works are not in Navajo. That was a surprise.
Yeah, to me as well. And I guess it's just because, I mean, I guess this just kind of shows my privilege. I don't know. It's to know that not everyone can read all of the standard works in their native tongue, in their language. It's tremendous that it's being done. It's a work that has been long time coming. Several things, especially the Book of Mormon, has been translated for a while, but to have the complete standard works for those Navajo saints to be able to study in their language, super cool. Couldn't be more excited about something like this.
Now, I did a little bit of research on this, and you said the Book of Mormon wasn't translated. That's mostly correct, because this is a copy here for those of you who are on the YouTube. This is a copy of the current Navajo Book of Mormon, and here's the title page, and it's got the 3 witnesses, as you'll see here. This was in 1998 Intellectual Reserve here. You'll see there's the 3 witnesses, there's the 8 witnesses. And what we see from this particular translation here is that most of, these are the chapters here, 1 Nephi chapter 1 through 7, then 16 through 18. I know that's a little small here, but most of the Book of Mormon here, Alma, you get various chapters, not much in 2 Nephi because of the Isaiah passages, but most of the Book of Mormon has been translated into Navajo, but not all. And as you mentioned, not all of the standard works, because the church has been in working with the Navajo communities for a long time, especially under President Kimball and the so-called Indian Placement Program. This is a video here. I run a second channel, Richie, that's called the Mormon Movie Reviews, and this is a fascinating old church video called Bitter Wind, and it depicts Mormon missionaries, I will call them that, LDS missionaries, on the Navajo reservation back in the day doing missionary work among indigenous persons. And the church has been working in this community for a long period of time, which is why it was a great surprise to me that it hadn't been fully translated into Navajo, given the church's emphasis on the Indian Placement Program, especially under President Kimball, and President Benson wanted to flood the earth with the Book of Mormon. Still hadn't been fully translated.
Yeah, and the other question that I have that sort of surrounds that too is, as you indicate that various chapters that had been translated, was it in accordance to like the old mission discussions when we had just the 6 missionary discussions? Like, are those the complementary scriptures that could be seen and read in those missionary discussions to help non-members become converted to the faith? And that's why they chose those particular ones? Are they ones that meant or would mean something maybe more specific to Navajo members of the church or potential Navajo members of the church to be able to read in their own language? That's a curiosity that I have around those particular chapters already being available. But kudos, we're doing it all. We're going to make it all available.
It's all going to be available. And you also found this next article as well here, Richie, which is Music in the Spoken Word is going to premiere in Spanish. Now, where did you go on your, I know you're a return missionary. Where did you go on your mission, Richie?
I went to Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh, okay. I thought it was stateside. So, I used to be a member of the orchestra at Temple Square. I did many broadcasts of Music in the Spoken Word. It's always has a special place in my heart. And as I've mentioned on this podcast a number of times, the one thing that you will never see in the ex-Mormon Reddit is somebody bagging on the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, or the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square, because everyone loves the Motab. But they're going to be premiering in Spanish. The church is really trying to get international. As you recall from the last General Conference, they had those international singers that they brought out for the first time, bringing in some international flair into the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, or the Tabernacle. It's going to be, I'm not going to be able to break that one. That's just,
I just remember Tab Cats, and that's how I'm able to say it, the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square. But yeah, it's a mouthful. It's just the same with not saying Mormon and saying the full name of the church. We just need to think in abbreviated terms.
Yeah, well, I think that the tab cats are one of the church's greatest asset, and when it comes to making, as we've seen, President Nelson reshaped the Tabernacle Choir's mission statement. That I think it was just last year, and said that they're going to have a more international focus. They're going to be going on tours more internationally. They're inviting international singers in. They're singing more songs in Spanish and other foreign languages, and we're going to have an entire broadcast in a foreign language. We're seeing a significant departure from what we've seen before, and I see it as only good things.
Yeah, you made the mention you think it's one of the greatest assets. I would say it is maybe next to the Book of Mormon, the greatest asset. But I think in drawing attention to the church, I think it is the greatest asset. It's fascinating for me in a couple things. One, that we never had this before. Think of how many Spanish-speaking members of the church there are, and we just hadn't considered that. And I don't know how long this has been coming to be able to get to where we're at, but it's pretty significant. That is one part of it. Second, there's a Portuguese or Portuguese, I know return missionaries, correct me, version that's going to be coming on after the Spanish sort of launches. And then third, the big deal, I think, is when we watch music in the spoken word in English, it is always Lloyd Newell, a gentleman who says, now from the crossroads of the West. It's going to be 4 different hosts, and a couple of them are women. And I think that's highly significant. And I think that you may, in fact, even see at the point that Lloyd Newell, the music and the spoken word host, the spoken word part of it, when he decides to retire or to take a step back, I think that you'll start to see women appear in the English version.
Wow. I've listened to a lot of episodes of the Culture Hall. I've never heard a prophecy before, but I think I just heard one.
Oh, yeah, no, I do that. I do that kind of stuff all the time.
Very nice.
It just never happens. That's
it just fails to come to pass. Yeah. We'll give you a pass on that. Now we've left the area of maybe less controversial subject, and we're getting into more of the controversy here. This is from thepinknews.com here. This was written on June 5th by Amelia Hansford, and this is the title of the article. I'm just reading it off the page. Mormon couple savagely mocked after flying, quote, family values flag, end quote, during Pride Month. So April Wide to Spain has gained an incredible amount of notoriety for posting the proclamation. She made a flag on her front yard, the family a proclamation to the world, and she made it flag size, planted it on her front lawn. I believe they live in Murray. They live somewhere in the Salt Lake area. This has received a huge amount of backlash here. What are your initial thoughts? I know that you're fully aware of this, Richie. What are your initial thoughts on this? Is this a cheap shot here by the Pink News, or what do you think?
Well, okay, so you're talking about the headline. I think maybe that's where we start. The savagely mocked. Okay, so that's the internet. They put something on the internet and the internet reacted, right? To say savagely mocked, I mean, people did give them a hard time. Savagely? I don't know that's any more savage than anything else. My thought is this. So we all know June is the month of Pride, right? Pride celebration. It's everything LGBTQ. And typically symbolized by a rainbow flag. You see a lot of rainbow flags being flown. Those that would find themselves within the LGBTQ community or allies too, they want to say, hey, you know what? We see them, we love them, we support them in whatever way that means, and we're going to fly this flag. And then you sort of have this couple who says, well, hey, you guys are doing your thing. I have the right to do my thing. And they do, to be able to share their flag. I don't know what they hoped to accomplish. And if I ever got the chance to talk to April Despain, that would be the thing that I would ask her. Do you feel threatened by other people showing support for the LGBTQ community? Do you feel that the family proclamation is in opposition to the LGBTQ / like rainbow pride symbol? Do you what was the reason to do it? Were you just trying to be savagely mocked on the internet? Whatever the thing would be, I would be curious, because I don't think what occurred is that someone saw that and went, oh man, I bet those are really kind, Christian, loving, accepting people. I don't think they did that. And I also don't think that they said, oh, yeah, you know what? I've been doing this whole thing wrong. I'm going to change. Of course. Thank you, flag in your yard. I'm going to start thinking differently. I'm going to no longer, or whatever the thing may be. I don't think that it accomplished either of those things. And so I just wonder to what end did April Despain post that and share that flag?
Richie, I can tell you're a pro because you ask all of the best questions, which is why the Culture Hall is such a great podcast. And those all these questions, I don't have the answers to any of them. But she did post on Twitter. She did respond. She said, all the, quote, inclusive and tolerant have found my tweet and are mocking my family because we dare to believe differently than them. I'm so sad. Oh, well. To all of them, I say this. Here's another pic of us enjoying what we believe about gender, sexuality, identity, and love.
Yeah. Okay. That's sort of how I feel about it. I will say this, and you haven't brought this up, but this is maybe my favorite part of this story. Has nothing really to do with this story, but I love Photoshop so very much because of this story. If you want to go down a deep dive of how people have taken both like what April's husband, because it's a picture of the two of them standing next to the proclamation, what they put on his t-shirt, what they put on the family proclamation, like kudos to the Photoshoppers who are able to put like Adam Lambert, Lady Gaga, bunch of rainbow flags, an invitation to what it's. I appreciate that people can do something like that and hopefully let a little of the pressure out of the situation if it gets a little heated.
Yeah, it does. I just want a couple last takes because this is really taking the internet by storm. Here's a take here that I think is very indicative of what we see. It says a tweet, "I'm so sad to see members of a group that was once persecuted punching down on another that is still persecuted. Even the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they've been known to update their beliefs about sexuality because there's only one wife in this particular photo." Ooh. So, I just want to say one other thing. I happen to know the husband in the photo extremely well. We graduated, went to the same high school. And since she is just running for school board and his name is well known, Tony Despain, I went to him in high school. That's not a secret. I'm not doxing anybody. This is public. His wife is running for school board. His name is out there. I went to school with Tony. I was friends with Tony. Tony was a great member of the church. He was a really, really nice guy. He was a very loving person to everyone. I haven't talked to him since we graduated. We love to play basketball together. And, to see him in this situation, it brings up a lot of mixed emotions because I don't want to see my old friend here attacked. But on the other hand, I don't know, it's hard to read things in, but if you're espousing a belief that seems to be what some people would be perceived to be disenfranchising other people, then you're opening yourself up to criticism. So, I mean, I've really got a lot of mixed emotions here.
Another point worth bringing up is there are certainly parts of the family proclamation that could stand in opposition to what the LGBTQ community stands for, but not all of it. It speaks of love. It speaks of, a lot of these things. And I don't ever care for things like that to be weaponized. The other question that I would have if I were ever able to sit with April and her husband, Tony, is ask, do you know an LGBTQ individual? Have you asked them what, behaviors like this feel like to them? Because I can't imagine they've taken much time to do that. Because if they have, and then that person has expressed, oh, hey, things like this hurt me or whatever, then what kind of person are they? And again, this is all a fictitious situation, but I think this applies to all of us as just members of a community or society or whatever. If we know these people, we know that what we do hurts people, and then we go ahead and do those things anyway in a very in-your-face way. What kind of jerks are we to do that? That's not the way that Christ would want us to deal with that. And I hate to kind of invoke that whole thing, but it's not the way. That is not the thing to do. It's not changing minds. It's not changing hearts. It's not solidifying this. It's just, being a jerk.
This has also led to lawsuits. This isn't just a harmless post of somebody putting up a flag in their yard. This has led to a lawsuit she's being sued here. Ms. Despain is being sued by Jennifer from the school board member because Jennifer put some put some rainbow flags in her yard. There was disparaging comments. There was further legal action. This is not just a flag and somebody, having a disagreement on Twitter. This has gotten legal. This has gotten really, really ugly, Richie. In fact, she went on to the Midnight Mormons here just a couple of days ago, April Despain, to discuss her beliefs. And during that time, Richie, she talked about how they've been doxxed online. The people put their information out there. This is a picture here of the woman who's planting the gay pride flags in her front yard that she didn't want to have being there. She's got death threats. She's worried about her safety. This is a lawsuit. This isn't just a simple case of, you live your life, I live mine, we disagree with each other. This has gotten incredibly personal and incredibly ugly. And it's just, I can't believe both. I'm not equating both sides, but there is some really, really fringe elements here that are just coming out with guns drawn. Any last thoughts on this one, Richie?
So I would have to say to the other side of it, I would just say, guys, you can't go on people's personal property and put flags on. That's ridiculous. That's not that is equally, don't do that. That, do not threaten someone's life. Do not share, people's personal information. There is a way, and we have lost this, to be able to have civil dialogue about things that are like, hey, you know what? Can we talk about this a little bit? Let's share, let's chat a little bit, and be able to have a conversation and respect one another and their differences. Not agree with them, not say, hey, you know what? I talked to this person and now I'm in their camp, but you don't go on their property. You do not put things on their property. You don't tell people, hey, if you want to get at these people, here's where they live. You don't do that. And that's either side, any case, always, you don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, President Nelson in the last General Conference, he talked about having a civil dialogue, and his somewhat famous peacemaker talk, which I think a lot of people have said is one of his finest addresses. It seems like that really, people need to take that to heart, because it seems like that's time for this. And I sincerely hope that the resolution of this, that no one is harmed, no one is hurt, and that we can have a more civil dialogue, just as you just said, Richie. This isn't the only thing that's happening here from Gay Pride Month, which is this month. And this was posted here on the ex-Mormon Reddit here. And it says some ex-Mormons here are now desecrating temples in honor of Pride Month. Reddit mods have deleted the pic they took. So a couple of people, they went into an LDS temple as sort of a kind of a weird protest for Gay Pride Month. I don't know. It got 2,000 or 3,000 upvotes. They snuck into an ex-member and a never member snuck into an LDS temple just to see if they could. Then they uploaded pictures as some kind of a weird protest inside of a temple. It seems like this Gay Pride Month, it is really leading to a lot of people, a lot of sick individuals, and just I don't know what it is about it that it just brings out the worst in some people.
Well, and I don't know what you hope to gain with that. I mean, if you YouTube search, show me the inside of the LDS temple, I mean, you can see those videos. So it's not like they're breaking ground as far as that goes. I think they're terribly disrespectful. I don't think that, people would do that to other faiths. Certainly those that do it to members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because I think it's just bad behavior. There are certainly people that do it, and every religious group has those that would not care for what they do. I just don't know to what end. Hey, we got in. Okay, you snuck in. I guess there's something, exciting about, can we get past the gatekeepers? But it's not. I mean, it's not appropriate. It's not where you want to be. I don't know that there's anything there that I'm like, whoa, I want it, and rightfully so. I'm glad that it's not anything like that. I'm glad it's just a time for me to learn more about, Heavenly Father's plan and all of those things. It is a thing that baffles me as to what is the most disrespectful thing I can do. Oh, hey, I'm going to go ahead and do that. I don't get it.
Right. I mean, if you want to protest something, or if you want to get your message out, I don't think that doxing people, threatening people's lives, sneaking, breaking into private property, that's not, in my opinion, the right way to, if you want to have a social protest of some kind and say for to protest injustice, that's not the right way to go about it. I think that much is safe. This is not the only thing. We got with Gay Pride, we have a lot of LGBT stuff that's in the news here. And Richie, Charlie Bird, famous Cosmo the Cougar, he's announced that he's gotten engaged, and it's to another man. He's gotten engaged to, I'm sorry, I should have known who he's getting engaged to. I'm sorry, I forgot.
I think his name is Ryan. Yeah.
Yes, to Ryan. And he's posted this on Instagram. And of course, as you know, Charlie, as you know, Richie, who is Charlie Bird?
Well, Charlie Bird, probably most popularly known as Cosmo the Cougar. When Cosmo really broke on the scene and went viral on YouTube, he was the dancer, flipper, all the, just crazy acrobatics, all the acrobatics and things that you would see Cosmo the Cougar do. That was Charlie Bird. Went viral for dancing with the Cougarettes. He's an amazingly talented individual. Has written 2 books. One is called Without the Mask, where he talks about, being Cosmo the Cougar. And then most recently has written another book where he just discusses very deeply, very vulnerably his homosexuality and how he feels like that intersects with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Yeah, I mean, that was, he used to write, he has written Deseret News editorials, and those people are curated very carefully by the church. You can't just be a regular member, but he said, would everyone love me once he came out as gay? Because I was behind the mask. And as you mentioned, his book, Behind the Mask, that was a international sensation. And I looked this up earlier in the week. And if you go to Deseret News earlier in the week, you could still purchase it. But if you go to purchase his book, Behind the Mask now, Richie, it's not available for sale anymore. Deseret News has gone ahead and removed his books. He has a couple of books out, not just Behind the Mask. He has, I think, a couple of other books, as I recall. But you can't purchase those on Deseret News anymore. And he mentioned that the reason that he did is that he himself requested to pull the books from Deseret News. So Deseret News did not ask him to pull the books. He, according to this, he requested Deseret News to go ahead and pull those books out of the shelf. So yes, he's removed himself from Deseret Books, and now he is, he's got a YouTube channel here that's called Questions from the Closet. This has been a very popular channel that talks about, him and a couple of other folks, that talks about the challenges of being gay in the church, how difficult it all is, and I just want to play one thing here for you, Richie, which is his Instagram. On Instagram, he talked about, this is a little bit of a long clip here, but he talked about getting his book pulled, his engagement, and what that's done to himself and his faith. It's about a 2-minute clip here. And this is one of the most heart-wrenching clips that I've ever watched in my life. If this doesn't move you, I don't think anything will.
A lot of people have asked about the temple and what that looks like moving forward. And honestly, I don't know if that's something I'm ready to talk about, because it's actually been something really hard about this decision. After I get married, obviously, I'm making a decision that runs contrary to church teachings on marriage, and I will no longer be eligible for a temple recommend, and I won't be able to enter or serve in the same capacity in a temple. And that's really been hard for me. It's hard because everything else about my life will be temple worthy, except for the fact that I fell in love and married someone who is like the wrong gender, And people are saying, like, are they going to take your temple recommend? And I'm like, no, they're not, because I'll give it up. I know the rules and I understand the consequences, and I'm not going to fight that. I'm not trying to make waves here. I can honor and respect, but I've mourned that, and I will mourn it. And maybe in the future, my temple worship will look like sitting in the parking lot or walking the grounds and just trying to get that peace, or at least a piece of that peace, and remember the promises I've made and try to keep them the best I can. Okay, I'm really not ready to talk about this, so I'm going to try to move forward, and thanks for asking and caring. Maybe I could revisit it later in a couple months. But anyway, there's a lot of things I don't know. A lot of people have also asked me about church membership and policy and what's going to happen that's I don't know. It's really scary, but it's a decision I have to make for my own peace and happiness. And I wish I didn't have to give so much up. And I wish I lived in a different world where people understood this more. But I don't, and so I just have to do the best I can to try to be happy. And try to still trust God and live according to the ways that I know how to live and the way I was raised. I'm sorry, I'm really gonna have to move on from this because this is hard to talk about.
That is so hard for me to watch, Richie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. If people haven't, and I'm sure that Charlie has made a way available for people to be able to still get his second book. He and I worked together. Actually, his audiobook was recorded in the studio where I'm sitting and doing my part today. So I had the opportunity to firsthand hear him, talk about a lot of these things, and between recordings of chapters, be able to ask him about all this. Obviously, since he's been dating Ryan for 3 years, he knew Ryan at the time that he was recording this, and I was able to talk about that relationship. And I think it is one of the hardest things about the church, as far as like things that you just don't understand. Like there can be plenty of things that you just don't agree with, but I will often say, and I don't agree with this, so let me couch this, but once upon a time, I think that the church said, hey, you know what? God doesn't create people as gay. People aren't born gay, right? It's a nurture thing, and this is a thing throughout history. But the church has long stopped saying that. We don't say that homosexuality is a nurtured-based thing. And that for me is where I think the difficulty, the confusion, the whatever comes into play. Because then, if the thought is, if God created someone homosexual and all of the attractions just for the same as a heterosexual person, but then said to that homosexual person, I created you this way, but I don't want you to act in the way that I created you. And in fact, as Charlie sort of puts it, you'll be, I don't know if punished is the right word, but you won't be able to have the same blessings as someone else. That to me is one of those things that I have yet to make sense of it. Now, it hasn't crumbled the entirety of my faith and all those things, but it is, and especially having the opportunity to hear it, in person from Charlie talking about Ryan and his choices and all the things and everything like that. To me, knowing the loving God that I know, it's a thing that it's easy for me to say something like, oh, well, maybe it just isn't time for the church to do something about it and kind of have hope for it. It also isn't too far removed for me to think, oh, the church may never do anything about homosexuality, or making it available for temple and marriage and all those things. But it is a large thing for me that I just go, I don't have the peace. It hasn't made sense to me. It hasn't resolved. It is very much an open thought and subject for me.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate your insights on that, especially since you know him personally. And speaking of where you can find his books now, he has just this last couple of days here, he started a website called MrCharlieBird.com, and that's where you can buy his 2 books. Now, his books are Expanding the Borders of Zion, a Latter-day Saint perspective on LGBTQ inclusion, and then probably his most famous book here is Without the Mask, Coming Out and Coming into God's Light. So yes, you can purchase those books, even though he's removed them from Deseret Book, you can still buy them. And by the way, Richie, when it comes to David Archuleta's books, they still are in Deseret Book, even though he has come out and says that he's gay and that he's quote unquote done with the church. So I I don't think that we can just rush out and throw Deseret Books under the bus, because it was Charlie who said that he wanted those removed off of there. And, this really brings up the question for me and some other people. And I know this sounds maybe kind of crass or insensitive, but Thoughtful Saint tweeted this out right away. He said, "Will there be a membership council?" What do you think?
No, not until he's married. And then I think depending on, unfortunately, depending on whether the bishop wants to follow it up or not, because that's entirely contingent on the bishop and on the stake president. But to this point, and until he gets married, there's no sort of issue. As he mentioned, he lives a temple-worthy lifestyle, but at the point that he decides to marry Ryan, and that has officially been done, that is in direct, direct, what's the word I'm looking for? Indirect opposition is the word I was looking for. Indirect opposition to what the church says. And so, yeah, they're very much open for church discipline. If were I a stake president, would I, pursue that? I don't think that I would, but I know plenty of stake presidents who probably would undertake that. And part of that, I think, depends on whether Charlie and Ryan are, going to church and trying to have callings and what they want their level of the church to be. I think that most likely, if they're trying to act as though nothing is different and still want to have callings and be able to serve and do all that, I think that probably forces the hand a little bit, unfortunately, of the leader. But if they, go inactive, which would be a terrible tragedy, and not, again, what I think God would want them to do, to disassociate themselves from fellow saints, I think it's less of an issue. But one of the big things of kudos for me is that, Charlie has said, "Hey, I recognize, Deseret Book, that, what I am is in direct opposition to what the organization that owns you is. And so I'm going to have the integrity and I'm going to remove it." And that's no sort of dig at David Archuleta with his book still being available. But I think that there's a huge opportunity to celebrate the integrity that Charlie has. And that just kind of tells that, that to me is just yet another reason why I would want someone like Charlie Bird sitting next to me in the pews.
Yeah, now I looked this up in the Church's Handbook of Instruction, because I'm not as familiar with this as maybe you are or some other people are, but there are certain actions by members that will require they used to call them a disciplinary council. Now they call them a membership council. And these are the actions which will require a membership council. And this is the total list here. It's murder, rape, sexual assault conviction, child or youth abuse, abuse of a spouse or another adult, predatory behavior, incest, child pornography, plural marriage, serious sin while holding a prominent church position, and most felony convictions. So if you simply go off the Church's Handbook of Instruction, a same-sex marriage, that does not automatically trigger a membership council. Okay, so in some ways, I guess that is good news for Mr. Bird, and that's an education to myself. Any thoughts on that?
That surprises me, because I remember sort of as we're in the early teens of the 2000s, that I thought it was an automatic if you married someone of the same sex, it was an automatic thing. I wonder if maybe it's in a different part of the handbook, or maybe it's just something that they changed and that we don't necessarily recognize until we get to this point. But yeah, I'm looking at this.
I believe that was during the policy of exclusion. During the policy of exclusion, a civil union or a same-sex marriage resulted in required membership council, or back in that time, they called it excommunication. Mm-hmm. And after the policy of exclusion was rescinded in 2019, that is when I believe that the automatic, either a civil union or a gay marriage would trigger an automatic membership council. So I believe that is the answer. If any of our listeners out there or viewers out there can top me on my knowledge on that, I'm definitely willing to be corrected.
Yeah. And well, hallelujah. If that's not the case, great. Great.
Now, there's one other caveat here, Richie, and I also looked this up, and then we're going to wrap it up on this one. There is a table in the handbook that says when a membership council is required or may be necessary. And if you look at this, for when it may be necessary, it says cohabitation, civil unions and partnerships, and same-sex marriage. And it says it is required or may be necessary. So because it's in this particular heading where it's a little ambiguous, it doesn't say it is, or it doesn't say that it isn't. It's still definitely, as you mentioned, up to the stake president or the bishop. Any last thoughts here, Richie, on Charlie Bird, especially since you know him and this entire situation?
I mean, my heart goes out. Charlie Bird is not the only one who experiences this, and I think about this in our heterosexuality. I'm assuming that about you, Dives, but I don't know that. But I'm going to
that's right,
to expand that out to say, think if what you were asked to choose is, are you married, Dives?
Yes.
Yeah. So think about you look at your wife and you go, oh, I can either choose to be with you, or I can choose to be able to have all of the blessings and powers and things that the church provides. And at very least, I hope that allows you some empathy to those that are in that situation. It's not just Charlie.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for your take on that. Now, our next item of news, and I know that you've covered this very well on the Cultural Hall podcast here, is Lori Vallow. She's back in the news again. Idaho judge has set the 2024 trial date for Chad Daybell, who's accused of multiple felonies, including the deaths of JJ Vallow, Tylee Ryan, and Tammy Daybell. I know that you've been following this very carefully. For Lori, the death penalty was taken off of the table for her particular trial. But to my understanding is that the death penalty has not been taken off of the table for Chad Daybell, which is why some are speculating that he may come to a negotiated agreement with the state of Idaho, giving all of the information regarding these potentially or alleged heinous acts in exchange for going a trial, putting the victims through another traumatized situation, and he will plead guilty to and receive a life imprisonment. What are your thoughts on Chad Daybell and the Doomsday Mom going back on the trial here next year?
I don't think it'll happen. I think he'll plea, and I think it'll be done. I think, they have until April before the trial is supposed to start. It's like a 10 or 12 week trial because the death penalty is on the table. We saw Lori Vallow guilty on all charges, and implicated in all of that is Chad Daybell, to be complicit, to be an accomplice, to be in some ways maybe the brain behind the whole thing. I don't think that you will see him go to trial. I think that you will see him plea probably about January, February, save the taxpayers' money. He'll be in jail for the rest of his life, but I don't think that you will see that trial occur.
I really hope not. I really hope that we can just wrap this up as soon as possible, and potentially that justice will be served, and hopefully that justice would be Chad Daybell behind bars for a very, 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 very long time.
Yeah.
Now, our next article here, and this really has not hit the mainstream news, but I thought it was really important. And this is the 21st Century Saints, who run a popular YouTube channel and Facebook page. They have announced this, and they kind of I don't want to say put the cart before the horse, but before they have announced that starting very, very soon next month, that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the United Kingdom will start requiring background checks on individuals at the ward and the stake level who will be interacting with children, because prior to this time, the church has not done so. And this is there's going to be an increased level of safeguarding. There'll be safeguarding specialists to be called in every stake. There'll be additional training requirements. This is something that the 21st Century Saints have really been, I want to say, crusading on. They have really dedicated years of work into getting these background checks for these children and other vulnerable populations. And now we haven't seen an announcement from the church or from the so-called mainstream media, but they seem to think that it is an absolute slam dunk. And this, for me, is a major win for everyone who's involved.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's a major slam dunk for the church, and I would imagine it's coming to the United States. There are states here in the United States that require this. A few years ago, the church implemented the 30-minute training that you have to do online if your calling revolves anything around children. We changed to having the 2 deep teachers to make sure that there's always another adult in the room. We've put in a lot of safeguards. You will see background checks become a mandatory thing in the United States in the next 5 years, without a question. And the church will pick up the price tag for it, as they should. And it's not going to solve all the problems. It's not going to, people can have a background check and something cannot pop up. People can have feelings that they've never acted on before and it doesn't get caught in a background check. All of the things that people will say, oh, hey, you know what? That's not going to cure it all. You're right. It won't. But you know what it does do? It does help weed out some. And you might recognize that if we can save the one, that it's worth it. So background checks in the next 5 years, guaranteed.
Yeah, she recently appeared here on Mormon Stories and talked about how activism called Mormon background checks in the UK with the 21st Century Saints, keeping LDS children safe. And last year, this group called the Brit Vengers, they sent letters to every single bishop and stake president in the United Kingdom advocating for children and saying, hey, we need to have proper safeguarding measures. And it really seems to me, Richie, that this has been done at the grassroots level. And I'm sure you're aware, very few things happen from the ground up in the church, but this seems to have been an exception to the rule. Why is it that the grassroots stuff doesn't usually percolate up? Why is this an exception?
Yeah, you know what? I would disagree with that sentiment, actually. I would think that most of the things within the church, although they come from the top down to say, hey, here is the change, I think that most, I could not say all, but I think most things come because members of the church draw leadership's attention to it, and then leadership makes the declaration.
Now, Richie, it's interesting that you say that so many things come from the ground level up. That's an interesting sentiment because it kind of it brings my mind back to Brother Amon Corbett last year when he addressed the chaplains. And he said that, in my view, activism towards the church is one of the most masterful deceptions of our time. He seems to be saying that, no, you shouldn't have activism like the 21st Century Saints have. You shouldn't have a grassroots level. Things should be coming from the top down. And also Elder Oaks, from his famous quote there, from Opposition in All Things, he talked about how some opposition to church leaders comes from church members. Some who use personal reasoning or wisdom to resist prophetic direction give themselves a label borrowed from the elected bodies, quote, the loyal opposition, end quote. However appropriate for a democracy, there is no warrant for this concept in the government of God's kingdom, where questions are honored, but opposition is not. And that's my question to you is, it seems like the 21st Century Saints, after a multi-year activism at the ground level, that they were the loyal opposition, that they did have an activism type of mentality. They call themselves activists, and it has led to positive change. But the church leaders are saying that, no, we shouldn't have activism. No, we shouldn't have a loyal opposition. We should just wait for church leaders. Seems to be a disconnect in between these two. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would concur with your statement in that I would say, yes, the changes should come from the top down. I don't know if it is, and maybe you've experienced this in your life, it isn't until someone says something to you about maybe something that you do or didn't do that you go, oh my gosh, I had no idea. I will never do that again. I'm sorry that I said that thing that was hurtful. Oh, I'm sorry I didn't do that thing. I didn't even know that you wanted me to do that thing, whatever that thing would be. It would be ideal if I was a good actor in all situations to be able to walk that way. The fact of the matter is, I don't think that the church knows about it. And I don't think that they can know about it. That's no sort of slight about it. But it is members of the church that go, hang on, guys, elders, presidents, apostles, this is an issue. And you need to hear why this is an issue and what the issue is. And then, yes, the change, we shouldn't, as members of the church, we shouldn't say, you need to change this right now, and this is how you need to change it. Okay, I'm willing to acquiesce how and when it gets changed by the leadership, because that's how the leadership structure is. But they need to do that, especially if, people are being hurt. There's cases of abuse. There is anything that could be absolved, changed, made differently by a decision from church leadership. So yes, I agree with you. They should. I think that activism is is the way that they're able to know about it. And maybe they mean activism like picketing and, pitchforks and parades and all of those kind of things that would be maybe overtly activism. But I think that maybe, yeah, again, just the term of what you think activism is. I think that we don't know if people don't bring our attention to it.
Now, our next article here, and you brought this to my attention, Richie, is the Guam Temple. What's going on there?
Well, the Guam Temple, not a very old temple, but in the path of a typhoon. And this is back a couple weeks ago in the last part of May. A lot of the, not infrastructure. What's the word I'm looking for? The landscaping around the temple, beautiful trees, all the things. If you imagine any temple that you've ever been to, we make them beautiful. The area around the temple and the grounds of the temple obliterated. This typhoon looks like it was crazy. The temple itself, not damaged, stands as a beacon for the community, which a lot of people really love the symbolism of that. But most, if not all, of the landscaping around the Yigo Guam temple just devastated by this horrible typhoon. A great opportunity for members of the saints to be able to gather and to work together, and you see just a tremendous example of community coming together and making that right. But it'll be a little while before that temple can reopen because they've got to take care of. There was flooding, so I guess that's sort of damage, but no structural damage to the temple, and they'll get that put together, and then the saints will be able to enjoy that temple again.
And this is not the only temple that's in the news. Now, this has been in the news quite a bit here. And this is the Cody, Wyoming temple. I know you've talked about it. We've talked about it. But I thought there was a very interesting development that happened, a little bit of a wrinkle that happened in it this week. What happened here, Richie?
Well, so wrinkle, I may need to ask you a little bit because maybe I don't have the entire thing. But what happened is with every temple, what the church does is they appropriate the land. They say, hey, we're going to purchase this land. This is where this is going to be. And people go, and then they say, hey, and this is what this temple is going to look like. And depending on the zoning and restrictions, etc., where temples are going to go, they are subject to the rules of that particular area. So the Cody, Wyoming temple, if you've ever been, you don't know Wyoming, it's not much. It's pretty rural out there. This is going to be one of the smaller temples. And the building code says that no building in the city of Cody can be taller, I think, than like 30 feet. It's not very tall. The steeple of the Cody, Wyoming temple that was proposed was to be 110 feet. And so that was some of the issue for people. But also, because it's going to be put in a very rural area of Cody, people are saying, hey, you know what? This doesn't really fit here. This doesn't make sense to be doing what you're doing here, coming into the community and building this thing. And that was the that was the detractors, the naysayers towards the temple. There were lots of members of the church, obviously in Cody. That's why they're building a temple. They're saying, hey, come on, let us do it. And they were going to just kind of plow through and say, hey, this is it, and approve it. But what they decided to do was to hold an open house and invite members of the Cody, Wyoming community to come in and I think it's Elder Anderson is his name.
Yes, it's Elder Anderson. Elder Anderson, one of the church spokespersons. So that's right. It's unprecedented because the church, just like you said, they announced it. It was met with a little bit of opposition, and they pulled back the plans. They said, you know what? We need to have more of a dialogue here. We're going to talk to the city commission. We're going to maybe revamp our architectural plans. We want to have our church spokesperson is on the ground here. So for members, for non-members, anyone who's coming into the stake center, which is adjoining of where it's going to be, and they're going to be able to interact with them. The church spokesperson, look him in the eye and say, hey, you know what? This is going to affect me in this way. There's going to be increased traffic on the street. That may cause me some issues. And they'll be able to have a real dialogue here instead of just trying to push things through, which is where we've seen in some other places that was maybe not well received or was not, maybe burned a little bit of bridges. Here in Cody, we're seeing the church really tiptoeing around and really trying to take people's sentiments into consideration, which I think is a very positive step forward. Any last thoughts on this Wyoming temple here, Richie?
The only thing that I would add to it is that I hope that it is in good faith that they're talking with people and that there is a potential that they could change it. What I would hope is not the case is that they're saying, yeah, we're having this open house and we'd love to do it. And then they just continue to do the thing that they originally suggested that made people upset and then said, hey, deal with it. I think that we can have these symbols of our faith and these, houses of the Lord in these communities, and they can be a great contribution to the community. But if it doesn't fit it, I think that we need to be aware, self-aware, and kind enough to be like, hey, you know what? It is a house of the Lord in this particular community. This is what this community looks like, and we want to not make it look like every building there, because it should be different, but to have it make sense for the community in which it resides, and we should respect that
and be part of a collaborative effort.
Yes.
Instead of a kingdom/fiat. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I'm not saying that that's what the church has done in the past, but I think this is a great step forward and is a model for how, especially since we saw the backlash from the Heber Valley Temple in particular, where I think the church learned their lesson from the Heber Valley Temple and the way that they approached that. And I think that it's a positive step forward. Now, our last article here, which I think it's the most important article of the week, believe it or not.
When we chatted before we started recording this episode, you said, man, this is the deal. This is the big thing. And so I'm excited because I thought it was cool. I thought it was great. I don't think it's the big thing. So I want to know why you think this is the biggest story of the week.
I definitely think that this is the biggest story of the week. And I think it's one of the bigger stories of this year. And the reason for that is this is really unprecedented. Elder Soares of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles here, he's interviewed by international TV network in Chile. Now, unfortunately, a full transcript of this is only available in Spanish. And the full interview is also only available in Spanish. I could not find an English translation of this. We only have the church news' summarized talking points. But I think it is a very, very big deal. And one of the reasons is, and I'm going to test you here a little bit, Richie, there's only been one time this year in which a senior church leader has taken any questions from the media. And this is only the second time. Can you name the first time?
It was Elder Bednar, I want to say, correct?
Richie, that was last year. That was last May.
Oh,
close though. That was the second to the last one. You're very, very close. That was the second to the last one. But there's only been one time this year, other than Elder Soares, in which a senior church leader has taken any questions. And I won't leave you hanging, but it's the 60 Minutes piece with Bishop Waddell.
Oh, okay. Well, okay.
Yeah, he took questions from the media.
Yes, he did. But yeah, I guess I was thinking more apostles rather than that. But you're right. You're right in that piece about the finances in the church. He absolutely, but also different. And I think that this is maybe why I thought it was more significant. This was live with Elder Soares, whereas that those comments from Bishop Waddell were very much, what are you going to ask me? And I will answer that specific question.
That definitely is the case. Well, I don't know if that's 100% the case in the 60 Minutes, but I think that there were some things that they probably pre-agreed to. Mm-hmm. Now, I wonder with this Elder Soares, because again, I don't have the full transcripts. I don't believe that it was a any question, no holds barred type of situation. I believe that it was somewhat curated. So, but if you think about it, look, in my opinion, the presiding bishopric, those are senior leaders of the church. Yes, we have the Quorum of the 15, but they're also the top 3. We really have the top 18. So yes, but
fair point.
He only appeared on the 60 Minutes. That segment was only 14 minutes long, and he only appeared in about a quarter of it. So what do we have up until this point for senior leaders of the church interacting with the media? We have 4 minutes this year, up until this Elder Soares. And that he spent about 40 minutes on this program. So we literally 10x'd the amount of media interviews that we had this year from this one interaction. Okay, wow. That's why I think it's a really big deal.
Yeah. Okay, so all right, you win. It's a big deal. I acquiesce. You won. You got it.
I'm going to make a TikTok out of this that the Mormon News Roundup defeated the Cultural Hall. I just want to make sure. Okay. Well, it could be my only win, so I'll take what I can get. But yeah, so what? Also during this same time, he was on a 3-country ministry here, and he visited with the president of Uruguay here, hobnobbing with foreign government leaders here. And what did he actually say? Well, what he actually taught about what the transcript, the only transcript that we have, or the English rendering that we have is from the Church News. He talked about what I would consider very, unlike, as you mentioned, Elder Bednar last year in the National Press Club briefing, who had a wide-ranging interview, which included a number of controversial subjects. Elder Soares, he seemed to have been playing it very safe. He talked about changing lives as missionaries. He talked about helping youth serve. He talked about how people need to be spiritual people. He talked about building good habits as young adults. He talked about a number of he bared his testimony on the the Gracias por Estar 13 Años program here. And I would say, he gave a 4-country family home evening. He played it, in my opinion, very, very safe on this particular interview. However, I still think it is a win because, like I said, you have a senior member of the church who is putting himself out there in a situation where you don't know what's going to happen. It's live TV. You could tell them, hey, I want you to stick to the script. But, journalists, they don't always do that.
Sure. Okay. All right. It's a big deal. Big news story of the week, that one right there.
Yeah, just a couple last thoughts on this particular story. And this is if I was a journalist on, if I was a journalist on Chile News, I would have asked about the SEC fine, didn't come up, or Ensign Peak, or transparency, gay rights, women's rights, racism in church history, polygamy, global warming, abortion. Remember, Chile is a very Catholic country. It appears that none of those topics came up. And usually when it comes to journalists, they want to have the most controversial topics because that's what leads to people watching your program. So it seemed to me that this was a very, is it safe to say it was a softball interview?
Yes.
But that's better than nothing. Now, a couple of other thoughts while we're wrapping all this up, because Elder Soares, I think, is very important here. Now, he served, I believe he served his mission when he was 19 years old in Chile. He has a great deal of background and experience in the country. Chile has the highest number of members per congregation in the entire church, 1,050 members per congregation in Chile. That means that the total number of members per congregation in Chile who actually attend, it's really higher than any other chapel, any other place, because 1,000 people can't fit in a chapel. So the inactivity rate in Chile is higher than any other countries. In fact, some anecdotal information talked about how 50% of church members in Chile are in the lost members file department. In fact, just real quick, only 0.9% of people in Chile consider themselves to be Latter-day Saints, whereas the church claims 3.3% of people. So what I'm trying to say is, in Chile, we have the greatest disparity between the church claiming 4 times the amount of members that they think of themselves. There's a 4-fold increase. So if I was a journalist asking a Chile-specific question, I would ask Elder Soares, why is the inactivity rate in Chile so stunning? Why is there over 1,050 members in Chile and has more members per congregation than any other country? That's just what I would ask him as a Chile-specific question. Of course, I would want to ask him about a lot of those other things that I talked about, and that's why I'm bringing all this up. It didn't happen, and I really wish that it would have.
Sure.
Just a couple of other things. If you think about, you got the David Bednar. We have the last times that the church leaders have taken questions from the media. What are the last times that they have? We already identified that we had Bishop Waddell. He took questions from 60 Minutes. We had David Bednar, who was last May. He took questions from the media. When David Bednar did the Washington, D.C. temple, he took questions from the media. And then I'm really stretching here, Richie, but you have your pulse on LDS News. What is the one prior to that? There was only one in 2021. I'm putting you on the hot seat here, but can you name it?
It's, I don't remember the forum, but it's Elder Oaks.
Very impressive, Richie. University of Virginia, November 2021. So like I said, from November 2021 until now, we've only had 4 or 5 times where senior leaders have taken questions from the media. And my question is to you, why can't we have more than just one basic interview this year? Why can't we have, remember those days in President Hinckley? Why can't we go back to those days?
I think that it's media savvy leaders is 100% what it is. And I think that the world has, as you mentioned, gone to a world of clicks, get, leads, get, people's eyeballs on things. I think that the church becomes ultra vulnerable when they put themselves in a situation that someone can ask them whatever they would like, and they want to control being able to talk about that or not talk about that. Should they do more media appearance? Yes. Do they? No. Will they? No. Not until not until someone who can handle in the way that President Hinckley could handle the media can handle the media. We won't do that.
And that's David Bednar. And that's
I think
David.
so. I think that is 100% Elder Bednar's way of doing it,
Yes.
and knowing that he will be the eventual, barring some sort of medical calamity, the eventual prophet of the church. I can see that being a time when that swings back that way.
Yeah, I mean, gone are the days when President Hinckley went on NBC with Tom Brokaw and for a wide range, multifaceted interview. Remember, President Hinckley went on 60 Minutes with Mike Wallace. He went on CNN with Larry King, where a wide variety of controversial topics was discussed. Those are the golden days. And for me, that's really the reason that President Hinckley is my favorite president of the church. And that's also the reason that David Bednar, for me, is the favorite apostle, because I like people who will give me transparency and can handle the hot questions. Now, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean
I was going to say, I appreciate that too. And now I think you're going to give me some hot questions. You're going to put me on the seat, huh?
Okay. Yeah, you've been very good. You've hung with me. So let me ask you just a couple of tough questions. You've been a good sport, so I really appreciate that. So let me give you a potentially difficult question, especially with Elder Soares. Elder Soares was complicit in a decades-long investment deception, which caused the church and the EPA to be fined and reprimanded by the SEC. He has taken no personal responsibility for his actions. Does that taint his teachings on morality and ethics on live Chilean TV and the three-country ministry that he just concluded?
So that is under the assumption, and I'm not entirely, I don't know who knew what when. But that is under the assumption that when it was approved by senior leadership that the those various nonprofits that were established to be able to kind of disperse the funds, that's what we got fined for recently with the church with the SEC. That's assuming that the lawyers, as the church claims, said to them, hey, this is what they're doing and this is illegal. And the Elder Soares was one that said, yeah, go ahead and do that. That's the assumption of what you're saying as far as complicit goes. Did he know? And did he knowingly say it? So the answer that isn't really an answer to your question is, if he knew what the church was doing was illegal and said, yes, I approve of that thing that we're doing, which is illegal. Yes, I don't know that it taints, if he's saying this something that is a true doctrine and gospel principle of the church, I don't think that makes that not a true doctrine or principle of the church. But I do think that if he is telling people to be honest in their dealings with their fellow men, and he was not, I think that's a severe breach of integrity.
That's a wonderful answer. Two other hot seat questions for you here, Richie. Now, I listened to your last Cultural Hall episode. You've done 700 episodes. That is absolutely phenomenal. You have to have done more LDS podcasting episodes, except for John DeLynn. You've got to be second, right? You got to be number 2. Sure. That's absolutely incredible. I'm at a humble 60. I have a lot to learn from you. I just want to say one thing about that particular episode, and I know maybe this sounds petty to you, but during that episode, you gave the specifics of the full name of Ed Willis and his book, who was a member of the Black Panthers who converted to the church, and then Deseret Book is now carrying his memoir. But when talking about coming onto this program, you refused to say the name of the Mormon News Roundup, and you just called it an LDS news program, and you also refused to speak my name, just referring to me repeatedly as some guy or that guy. Am I wrong and egotistical to think that that's just a little bit weird?
Well, are you wrong or egotistical to think that's a little weird? No, I think it's weird. I'll tell you why I did that. There are a lot of times when people will say, hey, come do this thing with me, that never comes to pass. And so I guess, I didn't think about it altogether that much. It was not a deliberate any sort of anything. I guess my thought was, hey, if this comes about, we're going to promote that I, came into the Mormon News Roundup. The next time we do an articles of news, I'll say, hey, you know what? I went and I appeared and people can find it and be able to promote it that way. I guess in the half a second that I thought about whether I would say it or not, it was, I'm not positive that this is going to happen. And so I didn't want to promote a thing that I wasn't going to be a part of. And that maybe is just the pessimistic part of me that goes, well, I don't know, maybe it won't, maybe we're not going to connect, maybe it won't work out. But there will be that on the other side saying, hey, and if you haven't checked this out, make sure that you do. It's the Mormon News Roundup, and that will be there.
Thanks, Richie. My last hot seat question for you.
Okay.
I promise this will be the last one. Now, I've listened to dozens of episodes of the Culture Hall, and I don't remember ever you inviting someone on the show who isn't either currently attending church or is, or maybe somebody who's a former member or an ex-member of the church? Is that deliberate? And if so, why?
So, as I said at the very beginning, we try and find any sort of connection to the church. So most of our guests are faithful members and attending members of the church. Some we expand out to people that have left the church and then maybe come back, or were excommunicated from the church, and we talk about their experience. But yeah, to your point, it is rare. It is not never happened. But it is only a handful of times where we have someone that has never been a member of the church on to talk about something within the church. Very rare. We had a Baptist chaplain come in, a woman who does improv in Chicago came in. Jim Gaffigan is another one. He's never been Mormon, but Mormon people love him.
Wow. I got to go back and listen to that episode.
Yeah, we recorded it in the middle of the night, but I mean, it does happen. We still talk about faith with all of those individuals, but most people have a connection. For instance, and this is how we kind of brought it in with the improv woman. Her name is Susan Messing. She was raised next to the stake president in her particular area, so she knew all about the church, and so we talk about that. Jim Gaffigan, a beloved comedian who works clean, who is loved by the LDS community. That's sort of how we brought that in. But yeah, most of the time it's someone who is either a member or been a member of the church.
Well, Richie, I want to thank you so much for coming on the Mormon News Roundup. We made it through. It actually happened.
Woohoo!
Thanks so much for ruminating with me on the great and spacious beehive. And remember, no unhallowed hand can stop this podcast from progressing. So long.
When it comes to nicknames of the church, such as LDS Church, the Mormon Church, to remove the Lord's name from the Lord's church is a major victory for Satan.
Satan.